Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to the Medlock Post Radio Show. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your host, Richard G. Medlock. This is the Medlock Post Radio Show. Excuse me. I'm still fighting this sinus thing. Today is March 23rd, 2023. Here is where we educate, entertain, enlighten, and empower. Today, our episode is Turn to the Constitution. Turn to the Constitution. We don't need to look anywhere else. The views and opinions on the Medlock Post Radio Show are those of the host. They are not necessarily the views and opinions of Blog Talk Radio, Spreaker.com, its corporations, affiliates, or any other podcast streaming services. This is where we stand for the red, white, and blue. Yeah, we're a true American program here. We will fight for America any way we can. If life so dear or peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery, forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death. These words were uttered by Patrick Henry, a revolutionary firebrand, we might add, on March 23rd, 1775. Now, this was at the Second Virginia Convention at St. John's Episcopal Church in Richmond, Virginia. Now, his demand that Virginia form citizen soldier companies of cavalry and militia. And this was to protect their liberty or to gain their liberty. And this proved almost prophetic because 4 weeks later, on April 19th, open hostilities broke out between armed colonists and the Crown at the battles of Lexington and Concord in Massachusetts, and that ignited the American Revolution. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, on this date in 1775, you can figure out how many years ago that was. A little follow-up, excuse me, a little follow-up on the banking situation from yesterday. I wanted to clarify a little more about the bank, the BTSF, where'd my sheet go? The Bank Term Funding Program and the Exchange Stabilization Fund, which the federal government is using their outdated programs, or mostly, to take over the banks, to nationalize them. So, and I mentioned at the end about the digital currency, and that the Federal Reserve has announced that it is launching an instant payment transfer service called FedNow service. Now, FedNow is one word, F-E-D, capital N-O-W, and the F is uppercase. FedNow service, which has features of a central bank digital currency, the CBDC, and some analysts believe is the first big steps toward a digital dollar. Now, within hours of reporting that the Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank failures could spur renewed calls for the U.S. to implement a CBDC, see, folks, this has all been sitting there. They were waiting for the trigger, which I think they created. But the Federal Reserve announced that the United States is rolling out the FedNow instant payment transfer service in July of this year. The Federal Reserve announced that the FedNow service will start operating in July and provided details on preparations for launch. We couldn't be more excited about the forthcoming FedNow launch, which will enable every participating financial institution, the smallest to the largest, and from all corners of the country, to offer a modern instant payment solution. That's Ken Montgomery, first vice president of the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston. He continues, with the launch drawing near, we urge financial institutions and their industry partners to move full steam ahead with preparations to join the FedNow service. Now, this was in place and announced prior to the bank failures. All of this was set up. All of this was lined up, put together, and then 3 banks are taken over by the feds. And a lot of people think that the Silicon Valley Bank was taken over to prevent records going public about actually what was going on there. The Fed added that the FedNow service will launch with a robust set of core clearing and settlement functionality and value-added features. More features and enhancements will be added to future releases to continue supporting safety, resiliency, and innovation in the industry as the FedNow network expands in the coming years. Well, guess what? What's wrong with the current system we have today? Hey, I can tell you this. I go in there with a debit card. I pay with a debit card. I can walk out to my car, pull up my bank account on my phone, my banking app, and my money's already out. It's gone. You ever done that? You ever buy anything on Amazon with your debit card? Go immediately to your bank and look at it. It's already gone. Once you hit buy, once you put in your PIN number or whatever you do at a store, it's gone. I want to transfer money to somebody out west in another state, even at another bank. I can transfer that money. They have it within minutes. It's in their bank. So why do we need a new system? Because the old system does not handle digital currency. That's why we're seeing the changes. Now, one more thing before we turn to the Constitution here. Little note on Ron DeSantis. I found this out last night, and to me it's disturbing. He's been a great governor. He's thinking of running for president in 2024, going up against Trump and whoever else. Well, Nikki Haley, former governor of South Carolina and former United Nations representative. I've got a new name for the United Nations because they're part of this, trying to take over the world and be the controlling agency. I call them the United Numbskulls, especially after they put out that crazy scare report crisis the other day. And then, no, we haven't got into that, but folks, United Numbskulls, that's my new name for them. Ron DeSantis, great governor, doing a lot of right things right now. But you don't know who's running his campaign, do you? Now, I don't know if they were running his, I don't think they ran his governor campaign. But they're in there now running what could be a presidential campaign. Well, come on, Richard. Spill the beans. Spill the beans. The two people that are running his campaign right now and that are out there fundraising and that haven't hit the radar yet, but they are now because I'm going to announce it, is Jeb Bush and Karl Rove. I'm letting that sink in. That's why I'm quiet. Jeb Bush, who is a globalist, who in 2016, when he was running for the GOP candidate for president, who got less than 1% of the vote and finally dropped out, he couldn't even carry Florida, his home state. And he was a good governor. And Karl Rove, who was President George W. Bush's right-hand man and counselor, who I don't trust very far myself. Jeb Bush, when he was running for president, his campaign, his platform echoed almost to the T Hillary Clinton's platform. Go back and research it. This is who is advising Ron DeSantis. Now, today, Ron DeSantis, yeah, he's going after wokeness and all this stuff, but with these two in his camp telling him what to do, it scares me that he could change. I just want to put that out there. Turn to the Constitution, folks. Why the original Constitution will never be obsolete. It is very simple, folks. It's what the Constitution is all about, providing freedom from abuse by those in authority. Anyone who says the American Constitution is obsolete just because social and economic conditions have changed does not understand the real genius of the Constitution. One sentence, my next sentence is going to clarify all this. The Constitution was designed to control something which has not changed and will not change, namely human nature. I'm letting that sink in. The Constitution was written to protect the fallacies and the inwardness of human nature, the power grabbing, the greed. Now, the 11th principle of the Constitution states this: the majority of the people may alter or abolish a government which has become tyrannical. Well, I think most of us can look at what's going on in our government today, and I'm not just talking about the federal government. I'm talking about local governments, local school boards, unions have become tyrannical. Well, the majority of the people may alter or abolish it. The founders were well acquainted with the vexations resulting from an abusive, autocratic government which had imposed injuries on the American colonists for 13 years in violation of the English Constitution. Thomas Jefferson's words in the Declaration of Independence therefore emphasized the feelings of the American people when he wrote, quote, "Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. And accordingly, all experience has shown that mankind are disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed." Do you understand that? He says, we're going to take the low road. We're not going to fight back because these are people in power. And heaven forbid that we try to stop them. They'd rather suffer. No, thank you. I don't like suffering. Continuing with the Declaration of Independence. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is we the people's right, it is their duty, our duty, to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Now, there's a lot that goes into that. Are we just going to go burn the Constitution? No. We're going to change the people that are running the government, elected and non-elected, and put in people that will follow the Constitution, and put in new guards. We're going to put in constitutional amendments that state term limits, balanced budgets, and a few other things, all within the bounds of the Constitution. Nothing that we do is outside the bounds of the Constitution. It's that simple. We follow the Constitution. Once again, here comes John Locke setting forth the same doctrine in his classical second essay concerning civil government. Quote, "The reason why men enter into society is the preservation of their property. Therefore, whenever the legislators endeavor to take away and destroy the property of the people, or to reduce them to slavery under arbitrary power, they, the officials of government, put themselves into a state of war with the people, who are thereupon absolved from any further obedience, and are left to the common refuge which God hath provided for all men against force and violence. Whensoever, therefore, the legislative shall transgress this fundamental rule of society, and either by ambition, fear, folly, or corruption endeavor to grasp themselves or put into the hands of any other an absolute power over the lives, liberties, and estates of the people, by this breach of trust, they, the government officials, forfeit the power the people had put into their hands. And it devolves to the people, who have a right to resume their original liberty and provide for their own safety and security. Now, there's something that we can add in here. It says, or put into the hands of any other an absolute power over the lives, liberties, and estates of the people. This is what the Biden administration is trying to do right now, is put into someone else's hands the WHO, the World Health Organization, the World Economic Forum, and the United Nations power over we the people. So you see, reading this 6 months ago, we wouldn't have thought of that. But now we know that Joe Biden has signed documents to give away the Constitution and rights of all free men in America. turn to the Constitution. Power rests in the majority. It is important to recognize that the government was established by the majority of the people, and only a majority of the people can authorize an appeal to alter or abolish a particular establishment of government. Now, when we say majority, let's go to Article 5 of the Constitution, whereby federal legislature and the states, I say in the states, but federal legislature, the Senate and the House, come up with a new constitutional amendment. Then it goes to the states to ratify, 2/3 of the state. And the amendment has to be passed by 2/3 vote in the House and the Senate. Or the states themselves can call a constitutional convention and come up with amendments and pass. And if the majority of states pass it, it becomes law. The legislature can't do anything about it at that point. Article 5 of the Constitution. John Locke pointed out, when any number of men have, by the consent of every individual, made a community, they have thereby made that community one body, with a power to act as one body, which is only by the will and determination of the majority. And thus every man, by consenting with others to make one body politic under one government, puts himself under an obligation to every one of that society to submit to the determination of the majority and to be concluded by it. Now you say, wait a minute, majority, you're going back to Plato. No, I'm not. The majority vote, 50 plus 1, is the majority. And if they vote for something, then it's law. Now, there's no right or revolt in a minority. This being true, Locke pointed out that there is no right or revolt in an individual, a group, or a minority, only in the majority. Excuse me. But are we seeing these groups or these minorities manipulating the system, gaining from the system against the Constitution? As John Locke stated elsewhere, quote, "For if it, the unlawful act of government, reach no farther than some private men's cases, though they have a right to defend themselves, yet the right to do so will not easily engage them in a contest, it being as impossible for one or a few oppressed men to disturb the government where the body of the people do not think themselves concerned in it." This is where the courts come in, folks. Continuing. But if either these illegal acts have extended to the majority of the people, or if the mischief and oppression has light only on some few, but in such cases as the precedent and consequences seem to threaten all, and they are persuaded in their conscience that their laws and with them their estates, liberties, and lives are in danger, and perhaps their religion too, how they will be hindered from resisting illegal force used against them, I cannot tell. Unquote. Put some things into perspective here. We can throw in January 6th. Bad day for America. The Democratic Marxists have made it worse. There was no insurrection. Everybody knows that, except the wackos. What about this going after Trump constantly, even before he was elected, going after Trump? That affects all of us. He was president. Excuse me. Pardon me, I did not get to the mute button fast enough. Going after Trump when he was president was going after all of us. They're going after our rights and our freedoms. They're doing that with the made-up charges against the January 6th people. I mean, they arrested people that weren't even there, and they've been sitting in jail cells ever since against the Constitution. Biden administration taking over banks is against the Constitution, and that will eventually affect all of us. Every policy that the Biden administration has put out, every policy has been a detriment to America and we the people. And more people are waking up to that and saying that. I've heard the last couple of days on Fox News, people come on there and say those very words. We need to just, I heard Tim Scott this morning, senator from South Carolina, a really nice guy. So he made comment, he says, the solution to all our problems is very simple. We just do the opposite of what the Biden administration has done. We just do the opposite. And that's true. Remember, you've heard me talk about reverse brainstorming? How do we make it worse? Well, the Biden administration, that's how they operate. How do we destroy America? So let's take a look at the Virginia Declaration of Rights. The majority are then likely to revolt just as the American founders did when their plight had finally become intolerable. Remember that word, intolerable. Think about that of what's going on today. The pandemic. Okay. Certainly, there was no significant confusion in the minds of the founders as to their rights and proper recourse when they approached their moment of critical decision in 1776. The Virginia Assembly passed the Virginia Declaration of Rights on June 12, 1776, and Section 3 reads this, quote, that government is or ought to be instituted for the common benefit, protection, and security of the people, and that when any government shall be found inadequate or contrary to these purposes, a majority of the community hath an indubitable, inalienable, and indefeasible right to reform, alter, or abolish it in such manner as shall be judged more conducive to the public will. Well, let's take the southern border, or what's left of it. Does that not affect all of us? Look what the fentanyl is doing coming in, the sex trafficking, the terrorists that are coming across the border. Did you know Chinese nationals that are crossing the border in the last 3 months, those numbers have gone up 900%? Not 90%, but 900%. Now, who's getting them over here? Well, China and Mexico are in talks. So granted that the people are sovereign and the majority of them can take over whenever necessary to restructure the political machinery and restore liberty, what is likely to be the best form of government which will preserve liberty. Which form of government is it? It's what we have today. Incorrect constitutional action. The answers to these questions was a favorite theme of the American nation builders. And we need to be asking those questions today. What is our best course to maintain our liberty, to protect us? Go back over the list. A community, okay, it is instituted for the common benefit, protection, and security of the people. Letting anarchists run the streets, doing away with the police, is not protecting us. Judges just throwing murder charges down the drain, letting them walk, is not protecting the people. Look at the city of Oregon right now. They're dead. I mean, Walmart's moved out. Major corporations, restaurants, businesses, plants, they're gone. it was not safe to live there. They've all pulled out. There's nothing there. It's a beautiful area, or was. I've been to Portland. It's a gorgeous area, but not now. Let's take a quick break here and listen to Ray Charles. Oh, it doesn't get better than that. America the Beautiful by Ray Charles. Questions. What were the questions our founding fathers were asking as they wrote the Constitution? You know, that might be an exercise to do in your family. Hey, teachers, maybe do that in your classroom. What were some of the questions the founding fathers were asking to write the Constitution? Or just do it yourself. Write these questions down. And I would love for you to send them to me at medlockpost@gmail.com. I'd love to see the questions you come up with today and see how that goes. We might read some on the air. And I'm going to write this down because that wasn't in my notes. I just thought of that. Questions on Constitution. All right. That's all I need. I know what I was talking about. Now, moving forward, let's go to the 13th principle of the Constitution. Not all of it, just parts of it. We just talked about the 11th principle of the Constitution. The majority can change what's going on. When you have tyranny out there, which we have today, I'm going to say that. I'm going to come straightforward. Other people are saying it. We need to put a stop to it. We, the people. All right, so let's go to the 13th principle. A constitution should be constructed to permanently protect the people from the human frailties of their rulers. Now, we might have, I think most people in Washington are good people until they become corrupted with power. And that's part of the human nature of things, which right off the bat, I read Founding Fathers, the genius of the Constitution. It was designed to control something which has not changed and will not change, namely human nature. Power, greed, lust. At the Constitutional Convention, the founders were concerned with the one tantalizing question which no political scientist in any age had yet been able to answer with complete satisfaction. You see, here's another question that they were asking themselves. How can you have an efficient government but still protect the freedom and unalienable rights of the people? Efficiency and freedom and rights. They should go hand in hand, right? They do go hand in hand. When there's no corruption, when there's no human frailties in there. And that's why checks and balances were set up. And we'll get into that in another episode. The checks and balances that's supposed to be in place. But guess who's the number one check and balances? That's right, we the people. We are the power. Now, distrust, let's be clear with this. Distrust of power is not necessarily disrespect for leaders. Now, in today's world, that's kind of hard not to do because we know they're full intent. Let's go back to Jimmy Carter. I remember those days. I was a stockbroker when he was president. It was awful times. We had inflation at 17, 18%. Unemployment was high. Real estate basically shut down. Mortgages rates were anywhere from 14 to 20% for a mortgage. But Richard, that didn't cost as much back then. Well, no, but you're still paying 14 to 20% for a mortgage. We were looking at a house years ago to buy, and the guy wanted us, this is back when you could do this, he wanted us to assume his mortgage. Just take it over, pay him a down payment, and take over his mortgage. I said, well, send me the details on your mortgage. Well, it wasn't that simple back then. I had to go pick up the documents. It tells you how long ago that was. It was a 9.75% interest rate. Well, interest rates at the time were a little bit lower. And I said, I'm not assuming this mortgage. Not at almost 10%. and the deal fell through. I mean, I could have gone out and got a new mortgage, but there were other things with the house we didn't like. The founders had more confidence in the people. I'll focus on this for a minute. The founders had more confidence in the people than they did in the leaders of the people, especially trusted leaders, even themselves. Now, that's a powerful statement because the founders, founding partners, could say, all right, they knew history. They studied history. They lived history. They lived under a tyranny in the American colonies. And they said, we cannot trust the governors. We trust the people. They felt the greatest danger arises when a leader is so completely trusted, get this, that he's so completely trusted that the people feel no anxiety to watch him. Now, going back to Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter was a nice guy. He just didn't know what he was doing. He had some advisors that led him down a bad path. I liked Jimmy Carter. I liked him then. I mean, I even considered voting for him at one point. I didn't. But I looked at him. He was a nice guy. And now he's in hospice, and, bless him. He's what, 98 now? But anyway, but today, how many leaders across the country do you trust? There's very few. School boards, how many do you trust? County councils, how many do you trust? I'm not saying all of them, but there are some bad people out there that are using their position of power to gain power. Now, Alexander Hamilton wrote, "For it is a truth which the experience of all ages has attested, that the people are commonly most in danger when the means of injuring their rights are in the possession of those toward whom they entertain the least suspicion." Unquote. Right? We should be questioning our leaders all the time. Of course, now they won't. They just lie about everything. So how can you trust them? 200 years of American history has demonstrated the wisdom of the founders in proclaiming a warning against the frailties of human nature in the people's elected or appointed leaders. Every constitutional action has usually been justified because it was for a quote-unquote good cause. Right? Every illegal transfer of power from one department to another has been excused as necessary. The whole explosion of bureaucratic power in Washington has been the result of trusting benign political leaders, most of whom really did have good intentions. Thomas Jefferson struck out with all the force that tongue and pen could muster against trusting in human nature. Said Thomas Jefferson, quote, "It would be a dangerous diffusion were a confidence in the men of our choice to silence our fears for the safety of our rights. That confidence is everywhere the parent of despotism. Free government is founded in jealousy, not in confidence. It is jealousy and not confidence which prescribes limited constitutions to bind down those who we are obliged to trust with power. That our Constitution has accordingly fixed the limits to which and no farther our confidence may go in questions of power," and unquote. In questions of power, then, let no more be said of continuing with the quote. Let me go back and finish up. that our Constitution has accordingly fixed the limits to which and no farther our confidence may go. In questions of power, then let no more be said of confidence in man, but bind him down from mischief by the chains of the Constitution. Unquote. George Washington made it very clear why all of this was necessary. The founders looked upon government as a volatile instrument of explosive power which must necessarily be harnessed within the confines of a strictly interpreted constitution, or it would destroy the very freedom it was designed to preserve. Now, a volatile instrument of explosive power, we are witnessing that today since January 2021. Told you then, I continue to tell you, the globalists, the Democratic Marxists were 4 years behind because Trump got into office, and they knew that they better get it all done. This is their last time. And they have been running day and night to take over and destroy America and bring in a world government. We are watching a volatile instrument of explosive power, and we need to harness it in. George Washington said this, quote, "Government is not reason, it is not eloquence, it is force. Like fire, it is a dangerous servant and a fearful master," unquote. And we the people, not me, but most of us, have let the government run with everything because we trusted them. They put us to sleep, and we trusted them. And we're paying the price for that misguided trust today. Are we in danger of losing constitutional rights? Yeah, the founders knew from experience that the loss of freedom through the gradual erosion of constitutional principles is not always so obvious that the people can readily detect it. That's what I just talked about. We just got put to sleep, folks. They lulled us to sleep. James Madison stated this, quote, "I believe there are more instances of the abridgment of the freedom of the people by gradual and silent encroachments of those in power than by violent and sudden usurpations. This danger ought to be wisely guarded against." Unquote. This is how they did it. One little thing at a time, one little judgment by a judge at a time. Go back and read Mark Levin's Men in Black about how the Supreme Court has gone against the Constitution. He states case after case of how they did it. Men in Black, Mark Levin. Look what they did to the education system. Now look what they're doing to the banking system. Look what they've done to the health system. On and on and on. This is usurpation of the Constitution. It is our duty, as we the people, when things erode, we are to act quickly. James Madison in 1785 issued a vigorous warning to his own state of Virginia, but it goes to all of us. He says, quote, "It is proper to take alarm at the first experiment on our liberties. We hold this prudent jealousy to be the first duty of citizens and one of the noblest characteristics of a late revolution. The free men of America do not wait till usurped power had strengthened itself by exercise and entangled the question in precedents. They saw all the consequences of governmental abuse in the principle, and they avoided the consequences by denying the principle on which the abuses were based. We revere this lesson too much to forget it," unquote. This is why they stopped teaching the Constitution and the Founding Fathers and his correct history of America in schools, because of quotes like this by John Locke and George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and John Adams and Benjamin Franklin and on and on. They did not want future generations to understand that. But we're not going to let it go, are we? Look at what they did to us in the pandemic. They locked down the country, and not everything has come back. Many people lost their businesses, their livelihoods, because of government power action, which usurped everything in the Constitution. Now we're sitting here talking about the banks, and here's Janet Yellen and Jerome Powell out there. Oh, we're going to guarantee all uninsured deposits. Well, folks, guess what? They don't have the power to do that. The legislature, the Senate and the House, have to pass a bill to do that. Only Congress can do that, and they have not authorized that. Now, they might try. Look at the federal agencies, the FDA, the EPA. The EPA I talked about yesterday, Environmental Protection Agency, lost a lawsuit last year to the Supreme Court. They don't care. They're still doing it. But they just gave the state of California a waiver authorizing them that they can ban diesel trucks from California. California is trying to ban foods that they don't like. Skittles is one of them. And you wonder why we're having the problems we're in today. But where are the encroachments of abusive rulers most likely to attack? Great question. Where are abusive rulers most likely to attack? Is there some basic right which self-aggrandizing politicians seek to destroy first? The founders said there was. Mankind has so many rights that it is sometimes difficult to keep a watchful eye on all of them. Therefore, the founders said we should especially concentrate on the preservation of one particular right because all other rights are related to it. Freedom of speech. And they're trying to take that away. They've been doing that. They started it with political correctness, now it's gone to wokeness and censorship on the internet and all sorts of things. Take that down a notch. Yes, we have come to the end of our episode today, episode 125, March 23rd, 2023. I hope I have given you some really good things to think about today. A lot of good questions to think about. And make your own questions. Send them to me, medlockpost@gmail.com. What questions would you ask if you were to write the Constitution? Put yourselves in the place of the Founding Fathers. Interesting exercise. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's a beautiful day, first Thursday of spring 2023. I hope it's going to be beautiful where you are today. May God bless you. And folks, this is it for the Medlock Post radio show today. May God bless America.